Hello, it's Shahid here from the Creative Floor, and welcome to our pilot episode of Creative Autopsy. Just to say, we did have some tech issues on this recording, so apologies for some dodgy sounds here and there. And one of our panelists, Tim Jones from Advertising Health and McCann Health, sounds like a Dalek in this episode, unfortunately. I promise you he's not a Dalek, and he's reassured me he isn't a Dalek. We just had some really unlucky tech issues on the day that unfortunately we couldn't fix for the edit. Nonetheless, it's a fantastic episode. I really do hope you enjoy it and get something out of it. And just to lastly say, don't miss out on our next award entry deadline for our award show, which is the 26th of March. And if you want to be on our next Creative Autopsy episode, just get in touch. Enjoy. Well, welcome everyone to the very first Creative Autopsy. It's Shahid here from the Creative Floor. We're hopefully going to get under the skin of some really inspiring work today and get some insights about how it was all done and hopefully get some crazy stories that rarely get out of the agencies. We've got an amazing panel today. We welcome the Global Creative Director of CDM, Ollie Capon. You all right, Ollie?
Yeah, I'm very well. Thank you very much.
Liking your haircut?
Well, it's a lockdown haircut. Unfortunately, I haven't had a haircut since about early December. So,
Oh, you wear it well. God, you wear it really well.
Yeah, I'm embracing as my wife calls me, it's the old fisherman look.
Very smart fisherman look. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, very fancy fisherman.
I get called a lot worse by my wife, but anyway. Yeah, and we've also got co-chief creative officer of Havas Lynx, John Chapman. You're right, John.
I am. Thank you very much. How are we doing? You okay?
Yeah, not bad. Not bad for Friday. Sort of looking like a call center chap, so it's all good. It's all part of my vibe. And we've got the voice of the internet and the voice of every podcast and anything that you'll ever going to hear. The executive creative director and editor of Advertising Health, Tim Jones. You all right, Tim?
Hey, Shahid. This is very weird, I must say. It's like a Zoom call where you have to look at yourself as well, which is horrible. So apologies in advance.
And no job number either. So hopefully that makes it a little bit fun.
True.
That's cool. So thanks so much for joining. I think it would be really fantastic if we just kick off with some work and just hear how you guys did it. So John, is it okay if you maybe kick off?
So, what we're looking at is a book that we've developed called Andy Goes, and it's an anagram of the word diagnose. And the book is a fable. It's a kid's story aimed at kids aged 6 to 7, 6 to 8, and it's a fable about how being different isn't a bad thing. And the purpose of the book, it works as a early signs of indication of dyslexia in children. So it's a beautifully produced, illustrated, written children's book, and the logic and the thinking behind it is to give parents additional tools and awareness around certain indications and signs of dyslexia within children. So we'd done it a while ago. A creative director called John McPartland came up with the idea and started putting it together with a writer called Dave Eyre. And we've been working in partnership with a specialist dyslexia teacher, called Alison Walters. And it's just turned into this beautiful, brilliant kind of passion project that we started, or like pro bono work, and it's starting to pick up quite a lot of interest from clients, and we're pushing it on into loads of other areas, including like a learning app and an interactive website and animation and things like that. So it's the biggest problem we're trying to solve with it is loads and something like 80% of children go through school and don't get recognised that they've got dyslexia. That's not necessarily the school's fault. It's not teachers' faults. They just don't have the systems in place, or they don't have the understanding or the knowledge to be able to pick up on, indicators or symptoms of it, if you like, because it's linked to, other conditions. A lot of kids with ADHD have dyslexia, but it's just looked at as bad behaviour, or it's misdiagnosed, and it's an easy thing to miss. So, copywriter Dave, his son has dyslexia, and he wanted to try and do something about it in terms of, it's a big problem, and it's not to try and say, putting a label on something and go, you're dyslexic. It's about going, even though you're dyslexic, it can be a huge advantage to you. There's a lot of creative people who are dyslexic, and it helps them think differently. So the kid's story, the fable is, there's a kid called Andy, and he lives in the shadow of an upside down mountain, a muddled mountain, and he hates it. He gets frustrated, and throughout the book, the story unfolds, and he learns about the other characters that live in the shadow of the mountain, but they flourish and they adapt. And at the end, it's like, it's good to be different. It's good to think different, and it's a way of being able to relieve a little bit of frustration for kids that might be in that area, that critical time of being 6 to 7 years old in school, to not feel out of place and not fall behind. So when you read through it, it reads like a classic kids book, beautifully illustrated, very, very nice, simple story, ups and downs, and the art and all the rest of it. And then at the end, it doesn't feel like a test. First and foremost, there's no indication that what you're reading is yet being tested, so the kid isn't aware of it. And then at the end, there's a credits page, and it's like the small print for parents, and it tells a parent the reasoning for the book and the logic behind it and all of the structure of it. So it's written using something called Fry's 100 words. So these are words that is an indication for a kid of 6, 7 years old should have a grasp and understanding of these particular 100 words. Are like high frequency words, and it's an indicator of that their literacy's on track throughout school years and things like that. So we've based the whole story using all of those words, and then it uses something. It's called, let me get this terminology right because I always get it muddled. It's corrective partial decoding. So it's particular words that when you read them and you look at them, if you struggle with them, some children say a totally different word. So one of the examples is mountain, and they may say motorbike. So that's why throughout the book, the story's built around a mountain, and the word mountain's used a lot throughout it. So if they don't say it the right way or pronounce it the right way, or they say a totally different word, it's another indicator. So again, it's using all the kind of existing techniques and ways of working with dyslexia to be able to uncover that there might be something there that you have to kind of look at and take notice of and work with. So it's a really interesting piece of work that started as something very small, but we thought, well, if we begin to publish it, get a proper illustrator on board, write it with the correct people, it feels like it's doing a really brilliant job, because it's, you know, at that age, if you're 6, 7 at school, if you begin to fall behind in your schoolwork, you're on the back foot immediately. So it's a really critical point. So if you're good at school at that point, you accelerate quite quick. If you're not, it's easy to slip back, and then it's just an uphill battle type of thing from that point on. So again, it's just trying to give teachers and parents a tool to be able to recognise things and help with it, basically. And then a few other things just to note on it when you look through the book. I've got a copy here actually, so I can hold it up to the screen. But the illustration itself, we got, which is really beautiful, and I know that we can show it properly on the screen, so I'm not just holding it up. But it's by the illustrator is a guy called Paul Salmon, and he used to work at a place called Cosgrove Hall, and they were responsible for Danger Mouse and Count Duckula and that type of like kids cartoons back in the day. So we got in touch with him, and he kind of adapted his style, and we looked at the colours. So some books that are for that are used with children with dyslexia, they're printed on like a yellow and orange paper. So the contrast of words and colours and type and images against different backgrounds like has a huge impact on, are they easy to read, are they easy to understand, and it aids with that as well. So throughout the book you've got some pages that are light contrast, some that are really dark, some that are quite sparse, some that are quite heavily textured and populated, and it matches with the copy on the pages as well. So some pages of the story has one sentence, small words, you know, very simply constructed, and then the next page has a paragraph of words, kind of typeset in a particular way to see if children struggle with it or not, because there's that thing of rivers between words as well. So if you're dyslexic, when you look at a block of text, there's rivers happen between it, and it gets frustrating for children, people with dyslexia, to read it. So we try to take all that into account to be able to like kind of design an art director in a way that, you know, not only did the story give indication, but the look and feel kind of added to it as well. So that's basically in a nutshell the idea. And it exists as a book. We've started getting it published, and we're in the middle of working with a production company to create an animation and an interactive app as well. Something that kids can download and teach. There's a version for parents and teachers, and there's a version for the kids as well. So at no point it feels like a test or you're under scrutiny, but it pulls out certain indicators that, you know, it tracks certain things on the app that can help, like a summary or a diagnosis at the end. So it's brilliant, it's beautiful, and it looks amazing as well. So it's a piece of work that we're all really happy with and really passionate about as well. So I thought it would be nice to chat about on this, the pilot show. It's good.
It's really good. I've seen the book. God, there is an echo. I've seen the book. I've actually read it with my son. Thank God he read it much better than what I could. So I'm questioning myself now. But it's really beautiful. I love the idea of a children's book that is also used as a diagnostic tool. That's really cool. I think that extending it out into an interactive world is really cool. You know, Andy Goes shouldn't just be a book. Andy should go with you throughout. You know, maybe it's like I mean, I haven't seen it, but I'm imagining it as like the little character comes alive, and you know, you scan over any other book, and it does the same sort of thing with the words. Or I don't know what it is, but that's really cool. That sounds so exciting.
Yeah, well, we've had some test animations done where, you know, you use your phone and it brings it to life, and then it interacts with the screen as well. So it's accessible through a number of ways, and I think that was the thing. It wasn't going, all right, how do we make this animated? Because that's kind of a simple step, but you go, how can you access it? So you can access a book that's in your hands and you can read it, but how do you access it through a phone? How do you access it through a screen? You know, it's all that type of thing, which is dead interesting.
Mm, mm.
Was it a lockdown project, John?
It was done during lockdown. Yeah, it was all done, while we were in the house. And I think, it probably came to John's mind, the CD on it, because he's got kids at home and he's homeschooling like a number of, I think all you guys will be. But yeah, I think it's that type of thing now was front of mind for a lot of people. So I think not only is it topical, but this is the way of working from now on in the future, isn't it? So it probably came through that way of thinking and being in the house.
Because it's so smart, it's so clever. I mean, we've got two little kids at home who are homeschooling, and interesting, we were just talking this morning about our daughter sort of maybe suspecting that she might be dyslexic, and something like this would just be so useful for literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of parents just who are literally stuck at home tearing their hair out right now and sort of realizing maybe how stupid all their kids are or whatever, and just going, actually maybe they're not stupid, maybe there's something going on, and maybe we can find out in a really interesting way where we can get them to sort of kill some time as well. It's interesting.
It is, and it's difficult to diagnose, and it takes a long time. And I've got friends that are dyslexic, and people at work are dyslexic, and when you listen to their experience of it, there's no like set pattern, and everybody's different, obviously, and it takes a really long time, and it takes somebody to go, hold on a second, that doesn't quite add up. So again, it's just adding another tool in giving them more information so they're aware of it. And we've actually got it in a school as a pilot. A school in Lancashire, and they've been and in London as well. And we've got a video of a kid reading it with a teacher. And first and foremost, the kids eyes light up because they're reading a really nice story, and you go, oh, brilliant. So even just on that level, it kind of works, and it's dead satisfying to see. But the feedback we've been getting from the pilots, it's excellent, and it's helping just refine parts of it as well. So it's good. I'll get a copy in the post to you, Shahid, so you can have a look.
Oh, thank you. That'd be great. That'd be really cool. How did it come about? I mean, obviously this is a self-funded project with Havas. How have you guys generally got a pot of money for these types of ideas, or how did it actually come about?
So we have a bit of a pot of money to look at what we focus on in terms of producing as pro bono work. So generally most creatives have loads of ideas that they're doing in their own time and spare time, and they range from, making scented candles to, publishing books that are going to overtake J.K. Rowling and stuff. So what we said was, look, if we align it to healthcare, obviously, and it's for the right reasons, and it matches the values of the agency and what we're trying to achieve with clients, brilliant. Let's dig into it, and then we look at all of the pro bono work within the agency and pick a few to invest in, and put budget towards, and work with the creatives on it, and pull in other partners to make it a bigger thing, so we can go to clients. Look, do you want to get involved? And there's a couple of clients who are really interested, so it might get bigger and go somewhere else anyway. Otherwise, we go, do we align it to some of the charity work that we do? And this falls nicely with some of the kind of youth work that I think I mentioned it on another podcast with you, Shahid, with me and PK, the kind of D&I stuff, and the kind of the younger intake of creative people from different backgrounds and stuff. So it kind of all ties in with the overall aim this year of what we're doing. But yeah, we put budget towards certain projects that we feel are worth it, and have the reach to be able to help somebody.
I think it's really what I found really inspiring was just the whole mechanics of it. So you're talking about the colors, you're talking about the language, and that whole thing around fries, I think you said, because even if you just take the mechanics of that concept, I mean, even rolling it out to other children's book authors like David Walliams or whatever, do you know what I mean? It almost feels like it could just roll off into a much bigger idea of just having just one book, because if you've got the theoretical concepts and the mechanics within the concept, I guess, of the book, actually then sort of allowing anyone to access that kind of then spreads, you know, really further afield, which could be fantastic. I'm not playing creative director, I'm just spitballing with you, but it sounds so clever. It's not just a children's book that looks lovely and reads lovely. There's something very smart behind it. And even when you take that into the digital world, just having that mechanical and that construct, you know, you give that out to the world, and you know, different countries who have really famous authors or whatever can then take that and roll it out. It could be absolutely genuinely life-changing, like could be just phenomenal.
It's super.
You can have that for free, by the way.
Thanks very much. It's crossed my mind actually, but if we do achieve fame and fortune, I'll make sure you're credited, Shahid. But the thought of it being a bigger thing and not just you know, one storybook or one character is dead interesting, because you go, where else does it go? Because if you put it into different countries, you tap into different cultures. So you go, well, what works in the UK works in the UK, and that's great. But you know, if you take it to, you know, Southeast Asia, there's a different way of, you know, growing up and belief systems and all that great stuff, and dead interesting, you know, conversely in the US or in India or, you know, wherever. So that's really interesting, and that's the much bigger thing, because the more people involved and the more, I think it's that thing of going, this is the idea, but it's an open idea, and more people can get involved to be able to further the cause. So yeah, it's
even personalizing it. You know, there's this whole thing at the moment where, you know, you can personalize your own kids in the book. You know, even that actually would be phenomenal, because even if you were to monetize it that way, because then could generate an income for maybe charities or more resources towards helping kids with dyslexia with the next phase potentially.
Yeah. No, it's great, and that's the thing, and that's the beauty of it. I love that it starts as a book, you know, because it's like, you know, every kid's got memories of reading books and having books read to them and things like that, and it's a hugely important thing, especially in today's world of everything's digital, everything's on a screen, everything's instant, everything's fast, everything's throwaway. You know, it's like there's something, the tangible nature of keeping a book for a long time and loving a book is deep rooted in lots of people's psyche, and I love that's where it started. And I think that's the power of it, actually, that the additional stuff and how we move it on into, you know, different way people consume things and use it is the exciting bit as well. So that's cool, man.
That's great. It's a lovely project. I think, you know, all agencies doing these sorts of side projects is so good. It keeps everybody happy from a creative point of view, but obviously it's a great piece of work to showcase new clients, you know, to bring in new business. So there is a financial benefit to agencies, and that's the thing that we always struggle with as creators in an agency, is, you know, trying to get the funding, you know, for these types of projects, where someone who doesn't understand the value of proactive creative ideas in the long run to the business, like that's tough. So it's great that you guys managed to get it out, you know, self-fund it, pay the illustrator, do something really nice and sweet and lovely, and, you know, it will turn into a case that you can, you know, use pictures, you can use, you know, wherever on the website to attract new talent. It's just great, you know. It's really cool.
Yeah, glad you like it, man.
It's really good. It's really good.
It's really bad.
Tim, just say exterminate for me.
Exterminate.
Yeah, there you go.
Is it bad?
Yeah, come back.
Yeah.
Hopefully it won't be in the actual recording, mate, because sometimes that happens with the podcast, like people go off and stuff, but when you get the recording back, it's fine. So fingers crossed.
Good.
Cool.
I just like.
Go on. Sorry.
I just add my admiration for it, and most of the questions I was going to ask you've kind of covered off. So.
Okay, good stuff. Glad you like it.
It's lovely, and I think I'm really looking forward to seeing where it goes. You know, how you distribute it out and how it develops, and where it ends up, and actually then sort of capturing the people that it will genuinely help, and sort of hearing from the parents and the teachers, because that's the ultimate test in the end, isn't it?
It is, and this is why we piloted it as well, just to try and get a bit of feedback so we could refine anything before we go into full production with it. Because we've had a run of like 200 printed and bound, and even this, even decisions down to the stock and the processes used in printing it is changed slightly based on some feedback, and how kids use books, how durable they are, and all that type of thing. So it's been super useful, man. But it's great. It's still exciting. It is.
It's cool. So should we move on to what you want to share, Ollie?
Okay, so there are some similarities in so much that we started off from a personal experience, if you like, and then it ended up with a campaign at the end of it. And I think it's interesting with sort of charity pieces. That's very often how that sort of weigh in. And our campaign, we did this. I think this was actually 2019, but we just had a brief from the brain tumor charity again off the back of this campaign. This campaign was aimed at teenagers actually, but how it started was John Linscott is a business director at CDM in London, and very sadly his brother had a brain tumor, and he was still alive at this point. I think it was sort of it may have been the summer of 2018 actually, and we decided we would do a charity ride to Whitstable, a cycle ride, and it was we call it the summer. It was a classic English summer's day, and it just turned into, it was freezing, it was raining the whole way, and I never thought I would ever in my life ride something like 110 kilometers, but we made it down to Whitstable from our offices in London, and that just became a relationship with the charity. They were behind us. They gave us all the shirts and everything, and you just kind of built up the people there. We talked to them about what we do, and they were, oh, that's great. And so the relationship sort of built from this, just getting involved and doing with the people that help raise money at the charity, and then the conversation, as it would do, said, well, we might be able to help you as an agency somehow. And they said, well, actually, we do have this problem. Our main task is to try and the thing about the brain tumor charity, what it's fundamentally set up to raise awareness about symptoms. So over anyone other than teenagers, they're having some traction with, because parents are spotting when they advertise the sort of symptoms and the signs of a brain tumor. Parents are looking out for it in children, and as you get older, you can recognize it in yourself, and maybe other adults recognize it in you. The problem with teenagers specifically is that a lot of the symptoms, as they said to us, were kind of just mistaken for being a teenager, and some of them were I don't know, I'm not sort of being glib, but I guess when you get drunk as a teenager, you throw up a lot. There's dizziness. There's kind of, it's harder to spot because they don't. It is that point in their lives where they sort of separate from you as parents and hang out with their friends, and their friends aren't. If the friends don't know what they're looking at in terms of seeing a symptom, then the whole thing just kind of collapses, and you don't see a lot of your kids when they're teenagers because they're always at friends and they're always out and stuff. So they had this campaign that was a nice sort of video online, and they'd had, I don't know, I'm making this up, but it was something like 60, 70 views. It wasn't really cutting it, and so we said, well, we'll see if we can help you, and they have a program called Head Smart, I think, and that is all about kind of raising awareness of the symptoms. So I think when you ask for like funny stories, I suppose there isn't really a lot of humor in this, but the what we came up with as an idea. This is an interesting way how campaigns happen. We came up with a bunch of different ideas. The first campaign, I remember speaking to Tim about this when we were actually judging the LIAs in Las Vegas, and we had this idea called the unfair. So I was thinking, well, we were thinking that teenagers sort of how do you get how can you do an activation idea and get teenagers in and create something that's PR worthy and that other teenagers would be interested in. And we had this idea of the unfair, so it was like a fairground, because we thought all the symptoms that in my experience anyway of fairgrounds, that you do a ride and you come off feeling absolutely dizzy, you want to throw up, you want all these things, and there are lots of different rides and stalls in a fairground that kind of matched a lot of the symptoms. And so we thought, well, how can we do this? And then we thought, well, maybe we wanted to take over a fairground. That's not actually that easy to do because number one, the people who run the fairgrounds aren't particularly easy to get involved in a sort of charity event. You can hire a fairground at some considerable cost, and then you have to kind of redress the whole thing to make it branded for your own purposes. So then we started talking to a company called Cassette, who's part of the Omnicom group, and they and I went down to see them there in Richmond and said, could we do this as kind of virtual reality or AR or something that where you can be on the ride but actually be in another world. And they'd done something with Disney, which is there's a roller coaster ride and you put your headset on and it's actually kind of out of this world. I'd love to do it, but basically it's a Superman. Superman is superimposed on top of your roller coaster ride and you're experiencing the whole thing. So we thought, that's fantastic. Cut a long story short, we got to about 200, I think they came in at about 200 grand. And of course, being a charity, that was beyond certainly the agency's budget for charity pro bono work. And it's, we thought, how can we could raise money from, oh God, and the whole thing just kind of collapsed in and just sat on the shelf. But we then, so we thought, well, let's think of something else. And Snapchat came up, and one of our art directors, a guy called Alan Cinnamon, had two teenagers, and he said, basically, I can't get my kids off Snapchat, and so the idea came from and the number one I think story channel on Snapchat was this video channel called Fail Army, and basically just fail videos and people hurting themselves, falling over, that kind of thing. And so they sort of came to me and said, why don't we do these stories around Fail Armies? We can license the videos from Fail Army and we can ally them to symptoms. The problem was they're all funny. And it's sort of a weird thing to talk about. Normally in our business, we're into very serious, I don't know, sort of tinkling piano music, and very, you know how it is with all the sort of, but most of the stuff we do, it's very serious because these are serious, people are dying from this stuff. So we presented to the charity and said, look, these are funny, but we feel that teenagers are, you've got to get hold of them somehow, and you wanted them to share these symptoms. And when you actually share these videos, you get served up with something called, I think they were filters, but we started with lenses. Lenses take about 80 grand to develop, and that was out of our budget. But these filters were able to, you can create your own filters actually. So and then you can share those filters. And so basically the idea was to have a whole series of videos, funny videos that related to symptoms. You share it with your friends and they get served up with filters to add to their pictures. And basically it was sort of overland illustrations of people throwing up and things like that. It was all completely an appalling taste if you look at it from sort of the brain tumor aspect of it. But we said, and we believed, and I believed that the teenagers are a very different breed, and that there's a sort of dark humor. There's a sense that they would engage with this a bit more if it was funny, and obviously there's a serious point at the bottom of it. So also Snapchat said, well, to be honest with you, that's not really the kind of content that we recommend you do, because there's people throwing up and having their eyes bulging out and being sort of giddy and all these kind of symptoms. They said, that's not sort of content that kids share, and we then said, well, do you have any content like that to share? And they went, well, no. And so we said, well, what if you try this, you might find that people do share it. I mean, I would have done, I think, as a teenager. I certainly, a lot of my grown friends who are men of a certain age share a lot of shit, and so why wouldn't you? So anyway, the interesting part about that was that it turned out to be the most shared filters on Snapchat for the whole of 2018, I think, or 2019. So and that was quite a success, actually. Anyway, we put these films together, and the guys started trawling through thousands and thousands and thousands of fail videos, which I think, is like anything. If you trawl through enough of it, it sort of loses your ability to judge. But they managed to get a whole pool of these videos together. Fail Army managed to they licensed them to us at a discount or even for free at some point. We added some in actually because I think Alan's son had got a few of his own friends videos where they were cycling and falling off their bikes and things like that. So we put that all together, and it was quite a different kind of campaign to be involved in terms of social media. It's not something that, as in the UK as a pharma agency, the social media side of things is sort of limited, unless you get into the charity, unless you get into these kind of projects. And I'm just trying to think if I've missed anything else, but I suppose the other thing, of course, it linked to their website. We created a little microsite with a bit more serious side of it, with the illustrations, and we got all these illustrators to give their stuff, their illustrations, for free. And it was probably the most successful thing that Brain Tumor Charity has ever done in terms of a campaign. We only entered it for awards at the beginning of last year, and then Omnicom put a ban on entering awards, so God knows when we'll be able to enter it. I think we managed to get it into the creative floor actually last year, but it's something I'm very proud of, because it's something I'm very proud of as a campaign, because it was something outside of our normal sort of remit, and it was pushed through, and the clients were brave about it. They took a real risk in doing something funny around something, a really serious issue. Like all the issues we deal with are serious, but to do something funny, it was quite a risk. And actually, John Linscott's brother, Ben, he died, I think, in early 2019. So, and John's just really proud of this campaign as well. So.
In essence, the campaign was expertly simple. It was go to where the teenagers are and give them the information in a way that is going to make them take notice. never done before. We'd never considered tackling a serious issue with humour. It felt risky, but it worked. It worked so well. And that is something we've never been able to achieve before in a single campaign.
It's amazing. It's it's obviously very moving when it's got such a personal connection to somebody who's been part of the project. I mean, I just want to dig in a little bit more, if that's okay. Like, how hard was it to convince the brain tumor charity to do it? I mean, were they resistant in the beginning? Was it quite a hard sell? Because I can just imagine how difficult it must have been when you've got Snapchat saying, nah, won't work, when you've kind of got the platform saying no as well initially.
Well, it was sort of hard, but actually sometimes with clients who are great clients and are very grateful for any creativity to come their way, especially pro bono work, you've got a little bit more of an angle than someone who's paying for it all themselves. Do you know what I mean? There's a bit more of a teamwork, and I mean, obviously there's a collaboration with a lot of clients, but I think I can't remember the actual too much pushback. I think they were worried, but I think they also said, well, we trust you. And if there's kind of, wow, those are the golden words, magic words for creative agencies, isn't it? The problem was probably more when Snapchat was saying, as you said, when they were saying, well, this is not the kind of material that the filters that people share. I mean, obviously Snapchat is almost exclusively teenagers. It's not really like Facebook, and its demographic is very much within that. So they knew their market, but equally, we have within our creative team and in some way defense for the older creative, having teenage kids kind of benefited us on that basis, or having had teenage kids myself, I think it wasn't as hard as it could have been. It wasn't like but because they wanted to do something, they knew they had to do something. I think that was the crux of it. They knew you had to do something disruptive. And when you've actually tried a few safe routes already and had 70 views, they sort of go, all right, well, we've tried being safe and we've tried being, sort of concerned and trying to engage teenagers, and they're just not watching it. You sort of think, well, okay, shit or bust. And they sort of did that. I think that was their approach. And so, respect to them for listening to us. I mean, to be fair, we didn't research it. You only have a gut feeling on these things, and so and it was a little bit old school in that way. You sort of like, I think this will work, and they went, all right. That was sort of. I mean, I think I've sat on. Last year, I did the PMs as the president of the PM Society, and it came up. And this is an interesting, actually, add-on to the story. It came up in that, and so you have to leave the room, obviously. And I think it got a bronze or something at the PMs. And I came back, and I spoke afterwards to some of the other jurors, and they went, they just didn't think being funny was right. Okay, and at that time, the way we had done the just because of the timing, the actual entry didn't have much data in terms of how successful it had been. It didn't have any of the clients sort of saying this was the right decision to do, and so we took it to. I don't want to say that this is manipulating and playing the game, but I do think that case history stories, if you get them wrong, you can hide the light under a bushel a little bit, and so we re-edited and redid the video, which is what you will have seen or just about to see. We took it to our Global Creative Council, and people thought the same thing, that you're not making the case for why you were funny with it, because it just seemed to be glib. So we actually came up with a different title for the case history and called it, which was, I don't know why we didn't do it in the first place, but it was Tumour versus Humour, or Humour versus Tumour. And that sort of helped give it a little bit of a story around it. And then we had a lot more data as well to sell it. And then it actually won at Best Social Media Campaign at the Manny's in New York, as I said, before we managed to enter it in other things. But sometimes as a juror, you need to be able to, some case histories I know, and I've been on many juries when I've seen it, I think there's a better idea in there and they just haven't really told the story right. That's an interesting side issue, but hopefully, it remains to be seen whether it wins anything at all. But I think that was an interesting learning curve as well for me.
It's a great case. I think the using humor is obviously such an untapped area for all of us to explore. Even though there's such serious topics we deal with every day, humor is the one thing that's universal. And obviously it's a tough thing to get right, because sometimes it can come across a little bit off. But if you do it right, you really have stand out in health. In particular, I mean, brain cancer. There's nothing funny about that, but the way you did it, I think, would appeal to the market, and that's all that matters. It doesn't matter about what that fucking idiot juror said about the tone of the thing. It's not for you, buddy. It's for it's for the market, and I think that's so key.
It's true. We didn't. I mean, that was the thing. I didn't really care. We didn't really care. I mean, you never do into these. I think it would be slightly disingenuous of me to say that as an agency or any of us do these things entirely with only one eye on the charity. But there's always the aspect that, well, it's good work for the agency. It attracts people. It shows our skills off in different ways. I think there's always that element. But in terms, it gives me a lot more pleasure to know that it actually worked. And they had teenagers actually signing up to the brain tumor charity to follow them, which they never had. And so they were delighted about that. But there is always an aspect of, well, the better work we do is always a good showcase for the agency. That's the trade-off in a way, as for the agency, to be able to have something that's good to show.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, John.
I think the strength is the humour. 100%. It's perfect for the target audience, and like you say, humor's like a huge emotional pull for people, and not to use it just because it's healthcare and serious is the wrong way to look at it. I feel really strongly about it. We've tried, like most creatives over the years, to get humor and stuff, but we've got something at the minute which we're working on, which is like laugh out loud funny, like ridiculous, and it could be a shift change in how we try and do things, but it's just such a powerful tool, and it is about getting it right. Of course, it's not about laughing at somebody. That's never the thing. It's not about humiliation. It's about going, you have to be able to laugh at something that's so serious to be able to deal with it, to be able to cope with it, to be able to understand it, to be able to open it up. So I think the strength's in the humour. It's really good.
Well, I was just going to say, it's not appropriate. I'm not thinking it's appropriate for everything, but there's obviously occasions where that, and I think there are some. I don't know whether you guys feel, but there are some types of pharma that are actually lend themselves a little bit more to being playful, at least. One is, I guess, the target market, I suppose, in this case. But there are some I mean, I did a lot of veterinary stuff when I was at FCB or ICC Low as it was there, and you can be a lot more playful there because it's pets and there's animals, and it's somehow not seen as quite as tragic and so on. But the things like somehow diabetes, but maybe not actually the disease itself, but the sort of lifestyle around it. You know, there are sort of areas that you can have some flexibility around. I've never seen a funny oncology campaign, but you never know. That seems to be.
Hold my beer.
Exactly. Yes, I'm sure that Tim's got one up the sleeve, but you know, I think it's. I'm excited to see what you've done, John, in terms of this laugh out loud funny. Although there was that thing with this, wasn't it? The diabetes radio campaign that was a couple of years ago at Cannes,
Yes.
and it was
Yes,
you know
prick.
the pricks
Yeah,
thing.
that was good.
So that's what I mean about
The camera,
diabetes.
yeah.
Like you can sort of around the paraphernalia, around the not necessarily the disease, but around the all the sort of the paraphernalia that surrounds like blood glucose measurements and measuring devices and so on like that. That was laugh out loud funny, that campaign. But
That was great. That was great. I, I think it's in. So Shahid, I just wanted to jump in quickly. So I think there's two things. Obviously, the humor was great, but the social side of it is really interesting because this is a big, newish thing in health where it's so hard for our branded clients to do good social. There's so many regulations around it. But when you have a charity, that's obviously a lot more flexible. And I think this is where we can start doing work for organizations like this that sets the bar to what's achievable in health social campaigns. So I think, Snapchat filter is great. It's now a discussion that we can use when we're talking to our clients, for whatever brand or drug to say, hey, look at how this organization activated this patient group in an interesting way. So that's the thing about our industry. Like all these examples are so great. Like whenever we see, there's no jealousy. Whenever I see great work in any campaign, it's all I think to myself is great. That's another thing that we can use to convince clients as a case study.
yeah.
So it's really good. So like now we have a Snapchat one, so that's awesome. And I think what was interesting hearing about the process of the idea from you were going to do this big experiential thing that was out of budget or out of scope. Then you sort of whittled it down and you constantly hustled to get to a thing that's doable first of all, but also that's you're able to create something still because a lot of people would have given up. The unfair activation didn't work out. Woe is me. Ignore that charity, and then you've kind of lost out on that opportunity. But it seems like you've kept going until you got something out, which is great.
Well, yeah. The other thing, actually, I think in terms of the idea was that it's what we all knew enough about sort of those kind of social platforms that we knew about lenses and filters, and it started there, and I was like, yeah, it feels a bit underwhelming, just doing some filters, and not sure that's going to get some real traction. And then I remember John and Alan sort of running, like excitedly going, "No, we found these videos, and we think if we add those to the filters, then that's." And I'm like, okay, great. Now it's almost. I mean, maybe I'm a bit old-fashioned, but I could see the concept a bit clearer once you sort of saw the film allied to the symptoms. But then just wrapping that up into a social, there was a lot of learning curve because none of us really had done a Snapchat campaign. So our digital strategists knew a lot about it, and we were working with them to say, could we do this, could we do that? So there was quite a lot of experimentation, I think, to get to the final idea.
Ollie, I was just gonna ask, like, how have your clients, your sort of pharma clients, taken to this when if you've shown it to them?
We probably haven't marketed it as much as we should do. I think they. I don't know. It's a bit like great, but you know how we always talk and about, and certainly when you see great work, you and certainly Cannes tends to be that conversation's going on in bars. This is all fantastic, but it's got nothing to do with what we do every day, kind of thing. I think they're a little bit like that, in terms of, well, we could never do it. Why would we do a Snapchat campaign, and therefore how relevant it is to us? But the social media side of things, it gives us a little bit more credibility, and I think we probably under marketed it to our clients and probably to prospective clients as well. But it's certainly something we're proud of, and we probably should shout about it a little bit more, because I don't think CDM is seen as a digital, savvy social media type agency, and we are.
Yeah, I think a couple of observations that I've made. I think the first one, between John's amazing campaign and your equally amazing campaign, is that it feels like it's such a shame that these pieces of work haven't necessarily been done for a real paying client. And the part of the reason why they're so fantastic is because you're probably given the right amount of space, the right amount of time to actually just do it, rather than being told, we've got to do something and it's got to be out yesterday, and everyone's like rushing like, headless chickens to get stuff done. So I think, if anything, they are amazing case studies for clients to go, if you give us the right amount of time, if you let us do our job, if you allow us to actually maybe explore other media channels, other ways of doing it, this is what you can get. And I think the other outtake that I got in terms of the connection between John's campaign and your campaign is the element of testing. I thought was really interesting, because obviously the book's out in the market, you're testing it, you're refining it, you're testing it again, you're changing it until it's kind of ready. And even when it's ready, it's going to evolve over time anyway. And likewise with your Snapchat idea, it was always, well, we're going to test it. Snapchat say no, we'll test it, and we'll refine it and we'll change it. And I think that's really interesting for pharma clients, because I'm just sort of speaking from my own past experience, where farmers' testing mechanics are quite backwards. It's like, here's a visual, we're going to go into a sort of random room and just show some headlines and some images and get feedback, which is kind of ridiculous, really, in the world today, where it's like, well, you can just test on stuff on social media today, and you can get instant feedback today. You don't have to spend millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars or pounds doing it in such an archaic way. So I think there were the two main things I got, which I think could be really, really valuable for our industry moving forward.
Yeah, and it's context of testing and context of use, like that your Snapchat idea, Ollie. It's like, how would you market test that? Other than putting it on Snapchat. The idea of going into a room and paying people to come in and go, what do you think of this? Well, they're going to tell you what you want to hear, type of thing. But it's generally not in the reality of it. So yeah, we could probably do a whole host of hour-long chats about market testing. So let's probably not open that up at the minute. But yeah, you're right. It should be viewed slightly differently, I think, because the reality is different. You have to understand the context of how something's being used.
I have a whole bugbear about the way that pharma research is, and I assumed that it was just me and my run-ins with pharma research that it was like that, but clearly it's not. It is just right. This whole big idea, you've got reduce it down to one image, and sometimes we won't even show the lines on it. We'll just, and so you still have to kind of create print ads. It's kind of
I love that.
but I mean the benefit of doing something, and I think the one benefit of doing why activations and all the kind of campaigns that you see that are winning all the major awards, that I can't think of a single one that would have actually been benefited from a research group. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe in a way, if you can sidestep the research group, you're back to a sort of almost to a 1960s, 70s ad agency. Trust us, this is going to be a great campaign type relationship with a client, and I think that's exciting. How would you have tested? I don't know. Just top of my head, a couple of my favourites. The last, the trash aisles, or the suicide. Project 84. How do you test that? You can't test it. and in a way, that's maybe the greatest test. You can't test it.
Don't it? I mean, like John said, we can have a 3 hour episode about testing. It's so fundamentally flawed. It's such bullshit. Especially when they separate the visual from the copy and expect people to fucking decipher what. I mean, Jesus, we don't. Who's going to read an ad but just looking at the image and then on the next page, like, it makes no sense. But what I find in testing is, and this is bad because it's such a flawed system. When we get research results back and a campaign tests really well, I always kill that one. I'm like, fuck that. We don't want that one. It's really bad. Anything that tests well is probably the most generic, most easy to understand, most bland, boring metaphor ever. So we try as much as we can to go with the one that tests wrong, and then adapt the questioning to probe a little bit deeper, because I think so many good ideas get killed like that, and what rises to the top in testing is always the things that people think that they want to see, Oh, it's an old couple on the beach, yeah, great, we love that, that type of thing.
Well, look, thank you all for joining the very first Creative Autopsy. I hope it's been great. I mean, I personally loved seeing the work, finding a little bit behind, how it was all developed and how it was all done. And I hope anyone listening to this will also have got something out of it. If anything, it sort of killed a little bit of time in lockdown, which quite frankly is much needed, I think. So anyway, look, I hope it's recording okay as well, because if it's all lost, can you imagine? Anyway, it's been therapy nonetheless. So look, thank you so much. Absolutely. And until next time, take care.
Thank you, Shahid.
Cheers, guys.
It's all right.